Hello everyone, my name is Monique Apodaca, and this is my Family Involvement Module 7 mini case study. I'm sorry for having to do this presentation in my car. We are having some home improvement going on in my house right now, and this is the quietest place that I could find. So just bear with me. Everything should be as normal, just the setting is a little bit different. So to begin our case study, these are some main characters and also sub-characters that were present within the case study. First, we have Joel Pham, who is a Vietnamese student. We have Mr. and Miss Pham. Those are Joel's parents, also of Vietnamese descent. Mr. Rolnick, who is Joel's teacher. And then some sub-characters that we see and hear from, not a lot, but a little bit throughout this case study. Miles, who intends to be Joel's science fair partner. It's also one of his classmates. Miss Smith, who is the veteran teacher that helps and discusses the issue at hand with Mr. Rolnick. And then, of course, we have our other staff members that were involved in the prior situation in this case. So let's get down to what this situation is. Mainly and foremost, it all has to do with assumption. But what is leading up to this assumption is, one, Mr. Rolnick is trying to increase family involvement at school. He wants Joel's parents to become more involved because through his mind and through his eyes, it seems like they are able to. Number two, Joel's family does not engage when contacted about the family involvement and the volunteering. Now, Mr. Rolnick does reach out to the family again to see if Mr. Pham would like to meet with him to discuss the science fair partnership between Joel and Miles. But again, Dad or Mr. Pham just kind of brushes Mr. Rolnick off. He doesn't want to have a conversation with him. He tells Mr. Rolnick that he will speak to his son on his own. Mr. Rolnick then begins to make assumptions about Joel's family and why they don't want to come in, why they are not involved with their son's education. But he really doesn't recognize any barriers that might be in place between the family and the school. So this is when he goes to Miss Smith, our veteran teacher, and asks if there is anything he should learn or know about the Pham family. From what our case study told us, some concerns that are at hand here are that there is no response from Mr. and Miss Pham about volunteer hours. Again, this could be because of their Vietnamese descent and how they communicate with people, but this should also be a little bit worrisome. Why are we not able to get a response from Mr. and Miss Pham? Another question that I had that regards to the school I teach at, are family involvement hours required? So at the school I currently teach at, for each student that you have enrolled at Swallows Charter Academy, you have to complete, I believe, 10 volunteer hours per year. So I'm just curious if Mr. Rolnick is just trying to increase this family involvement, or if this is something that Mr. and Miss Pham need to hold up their end of the bargain on. And finally here, number 3, we really need to be concerned about the previous negative experience that Mr. and Miss Pham had with the school. As far as the Vignette stated, the teachers that were involved in that situation are still employed there, which might make the parents feel like they can't trust the school. How serious and severe was the situation? Should these teachers still be employed here, or is it uncomfortable that they are? So I would have liked to know more about what the situation was that made Mr. and Miss Pham uncomfortable, just so it gave me more information on moving forward. What other factors might be keeping Mr. and Miss Pham from volunteering? So if we are not saying that it has anything to do with being uncomfortable, I had some more questions about what might be going on. First, we learn what Miss Pham does for a living, but we never hear about what Mr. Pham does. So, does he have time to volunteer? Does he own a business? Does he work a full-time job? I feel like we really only learned about Miss Pham and didn't learn about the other half of their family. Another thing to consider here is if Mr. and Miss Pham have any other children to tend to. Do they have younger toddlers at home and aren't able to come in? Do they have older students away from home so they are always needing to be at home because they don't have a sitter? Maybe they don't have family here to help them out. All of that is very important to remember when thinking about why they might not be volunteering. They could also have family issues in place, deaths, divorce. All of these things could be taking place as well. So it's easy to make assumptions about why people aren't there and aren't participating, but we need to keep these in mind as well. And finally, we still don't have information on the cultural issues that happened previously, but I'm sure that has a large role here in this current situation. So the personal experiences I've had with this, number one, uninvolved parents. Now at Swallows Charter Academy, parents sign a school contract each year saying that they are going to be involved in their students' education. They must follow that contract or it is brought up to administration. So that's my first experience. Unfortunately, I had a very poor experience with that this week with parents that they say that they cannot be involved because of owning a business, but it's their children and their children are learning remotely by choice. So it really does help to have those involved parents just in a student's schoolwork. Not coming in to volunteer necessarily, but just being there for their child is extremely important. Of course, we have our divorced parents, and that is always an interesting situation to see if they get along or if things need to be kept separately. And in most cases, you're able to physically or emotionally tell which parent a child is with. If work is getting done, if they're coming to school groomed. So this was another personal experience of mine. And finally, I think COVID has changed things greatly. Online learning, coming back to in-person learning. With COVID and remote learning, parents had to play a whole different role in their children's education, and I think we learned that this year. So our second question, how should Mr. Rolnick and other teachers and administrators reach out to parents and other caretakers who might have experienced school as a hostile environment? This is beyond common across parents. Specifically with subjects. If a parent doesn't like math, they really let their child know they didn't like math, and etc. So I think the best thing we can do is communicate. Speak with those parents and let them be heard. That's what parents want most of the time, is just to be heard and be able to get their point of view out. So I think that is the most helpful when reaching out. Just communicate and let them speak. Also, it's important to let families know always that we are on the same team. We have the same end goal, and it's always to help their child. I think we could also offer more opportunities to volunteer away from school, not necessarily just prepping materials. My apologies. Not just necessarily prepping materials for events, but having them help with other things, prepping materials for classroom projects, having them prep materials for maybe introducing their culture into the classroom. And finally, we should just always respect families' decisions to come and volunteer, to participate, or not to do those things. And personally, I think we all experience this with all families. All families should know that we are on the same team with them. And I know sometimes it can be hard to let families speak their mind, but at least it makes them feel like they're heard and that, again, we are on the same page. How would staff be aware of barriers? Well, number one, if they are teaching at a school, they either need to know or learn the demographics of that area. I'm specifically lucky because I live in my demographic, but if you need to travel to get to work or you teach in a different part of town, you should learn your area's demographics. I think that administration should also offer professional development regarding barriers for those demographics. So, what are some barriers that we face with our African American families? What are barriers that we face with our Hispanic families, our Asian families, etc.? Teachers should also talk amongst each other and share things that they've experienced. In this situation, if teachers may have communicated better to the newer teachers coming in, this situation could have possibly been avoided. And most importantly, teachers themselves should always be trying to build rapport and communicate with the families in their classroom. That is the best way to learn barriers. You learn barriers by experiencing them. So I think it's important to build rapport not only with your students, but with their families as well. And finally, never assume or put someone in a stereotype based on what they look like, based on beliefs, etc. So I'm not sure this situation could rightfully been eliminated, but the situation was already present before Mr. Rolnick in this situation. The culturally diverse situation happened before Mr. Rolnick. It's just coming to surface now with Mr. and Mrs. Pham's child. But the school could have given Mr. Rolnick a heads up on this family if they knew, and that could have been done through administration, other teachers, or just giving him background on the Vietnamese culture. Some ways parents can be involved beyond volunteering. Number one, at home, when their child comes home, these parents, any parents, should have a positive mindset about learning. Learning is wonderful. Learning never ends. There should be a positive mindset about learning new things. It's also very helpful, and this is an issue that I've been having with remote learning, parents assisting with students' homework, being there to ask questions if they're able to understand and comprehend what their child is learning, helping them study for tests, for spelling words, anything of the sort at home. Any type of help helps. They could attend other school events or meetings happening around the school. Doesn't necessarily need to be volunteer hours. They can go to a PTO meeting, a board meeting, etc. And then, of course, they can always donate or fundraise to help with the school. A very cool thing that Swallows Charter Academy does, since we do volunteer hours per child, instead of volunteering at the school, parents can pay a certain amount of money to go towards their volunteer hours. So for every $10 they give, it's an hour knocked off. So if they give $100, their hours are completely done for the school year. For our families that are lower income and don't have time to volunteer, I specifically don't know what happens. I'm sure that there is some type of understanding between them and administration, but I do need to look into what happens if there isn't a way to do either. And that is my Module 7 mini case study.